Welcome to Otto Talks Energy, and I'm your host, Otto Yakutovich. I'm so excited to be talking to you today about the energy industry, and I hope that my excitement will affect you. I've prepared 3 reasons why I believe the energy industry is just awesome, and I hope that I convince you by the end of this discussion that the energy industry is something that we should all want to know about and learn more about, and subsequently that you might watch additional videos after this. So, reason number 1. The energy industry is the lifeblood of the world. Now that's a pretty big claim, but with some examples I think I can convince you that every day as individuals or citizens in a town or in a country or even internationally, things go on that are affected by the energy industry. For example, let's talk about it on an individual basis first. I got up this morning, I had breakfast. Well, that breakfast, that food, the vegetables and fruits, it's fertilized. And that fertilizer can come from, well, it's a petroleum product. So that's one example of how energy industry affects even something mundane as breakfast. Then I go to work. Well, how do I get there? I drive my car. I'm using gasoline, a petroleum product again. And then I get to work and I flick on the lights, turn on my computer. Those are examples of electricity usage. So that could be coal, it could be uranium, natural gas, it could be solar, it could be wind. Electricity could come from many places, but it's all part of the energy industry. So on an individual level, we can't do anything without being affected by the energy industry. But on even a larger level, it's still very important. I'll consider a municipal level. Power companies, they have to find a place to build those power plants. The municipality provides the land use rules for a power plant or a pipeline. Or maybe the price of gasoline would affect how many cars are on the road, so maybe that would affect ordinances on parking or availability of parking in your area. These are just some of the examples on a municipal level how that could be affected. On a national level, it can be very important too. For instance, your transportation legislation may be affected. Miles per gallon laws, Clean Air Act laws, policies about public transportation. All of these things are driven off of the energy industry. Now on an international level, it's even more important because it affects politics. It affects the competition for limited natural resources. And I dare say it can lead to wars. So the energy industry is vitally important to all other industries and to our normal day lives. The second reason the energy industry is something everyone should want to know about is because it's changing so rapidly now. And I would divide the changes into 2 different buckets. One, there are changes related to technologies. And some of these you may have already heard about. These could be things like fracking and horizontal drilling. Now this example is responsible for natural gas production in the United States increasing tremendously within the past 10 years. Thanks to fracking and horizontal drilling, the United States produces an enormous amount of oil and natural gas from existing wells. But the new technologies go beyond that. There's also smart meters. So what are smart meters? They replace the normal meters on our house, but these have the capability to control appliances in the house. So you may be wondering, why would anyone want that? Well, it has a great benefit. In theory, what would happen is on a very hot day, middle of August, everyone's got their AC on, maybe people have their washers on too, and we need a little bit more power. Well, if we have the power, we could turn on our most expensive power plant. Or maybe we don't have an additional power plant and we're risking the stability of the grid. So as an alternative, what we could do is we could turn off the AC to some houses, or cycle it, or maybe turn off their dishwasher or their dryer. It affords some level of control to provide for the stability of the grid, or in response to a certain price for electricity. Now that we're talking about price, I want to point out that some of these changes, they're not related to technologies directly, they're related to price inputs. For instance, in some territories, there's a consideration made for charging the customer what it costs to produce on an hourly basis or real-time basis, so that when electricity is very expensive to produce, the customer would be charged the most then. And the hope is that this would incentivize people to respond in a way that would be to drive the price of electricity down. In other words, turn off your AC during the most energy-intensive parts of the day. There's also other technologies that would be disruptive and very interesting. For example, the microgrids, or decentralized energy production. So imagine there's many people that want to have solar cells on top of their house, or they want to have a windmill, or they want to produce their own power somehow. Well, with these microgrids, they could put power back on the grid for their small location, or alternatively, we could have smaller power plants distributed all through the US. And that way, if you lost one big power plant, it wouldn't be so detrimental to the community. So that's a little bit about how the technologies can be disruptive. But that's not all of it, because the cultural changes have also promised a lot of big changes. We talked a little bit about people wanting to be off the grid. That itself is a growing fraction of the people in the world. They want to have the capability to provide electricity for themselves and their loved ones without having to rely on the grid. So again, this could be solar cells, it could be a windmill, batteries, it could be a diesel generator on site, it could be many different things. But this is contributing to the utilities and the municipalities providing a means for them to provide power back to the grid, which it wasn't originally designed to do. So that is causing reconsideration of how the grid is built. Another cultural change is the movement to conserve. Now there's two sides to this. There's the part of conservation that seeks to provide as much green power as possible. Renewables, for instance. Again, wind, solar, tidal, whatever it is. And then there's the other part that looks to reduce the demand of electricity through various means. So that could be increasing the price, providing price signals. It could also be just increasing the price wholesale to drive the total usage of electricity down. So these are some of the changes that are right on us right now, and are causing the energy industry throughout the whole world to respond. And it's a very exciting time. The third very interesting point I want to make is that the energy industry tells us a story about people. And it tells us a story on many different levels. First, it tells us a story about how people cope with competing agendas. Imagine environmental stewardship, the desire to maintain electricity prices or energy prices low, and the desire to be energy independent. These are not mutually exclusive things, but they are competing interests. Some countries are more inclined or have better access to resources than others. So that brings us to the second part, the mechanisms for change. One country or a municipality or on an individual level, you can produce the change that you want through a myriad of different manners. There's legislation. You can legislate, you get an energy credit when you use your solar cells on top of your house. Or all cars have to go at least 40 miles to the gallon in order to be able to register them. Or maybe it's not legislation that causes the effect in the country, maybe it's an event. I'm thinking about maybe a drought has an effect on the feasibility of providing hydro. Or you've used all the coal in your area. Or there's a big tsunami and your windmills are blown down. Or it could be something like a Fukushima event where a huge tidal wave washes down a bunch of power plants. These are all considerations for how a country responds. Do they wait for an event to happen? Do they create legislation to stay in front of it? Or do they allow market forces to create the solution? In the United States, there's both regulated and deregulated markets. In a deregulated market, you can allow the companies to provide whatever solution they can come up with at the lowest possible price. So that is a different way to handle it. Sometimes that's not going to create the most diverse or desirable outcome because maybe they're just choosing the cheapest way to produce power with barely being able to pass the other things that you want to be considered, like the emissions and safety and the efficiency standards. But these are just some of the ways that the energy industry tells a story through the people. So I hope that I've convinced you through these 3 reasons. And those 3 reasons are the energy industry is the lifeblood of the world, the energy industry is undergoing enormous changes, and the energy industry tells a story through its people. So I hope you're interested because each one of these are very interesting stories, and they'll provide a lot of good info no matter what your background or interests are. So that concludes episode 1, why you should care about the energy industry and why the energy industry is awesome. I hope you will join me next time when I'll start to discuss things that everyone ought to know about the energy industry. I hope you'll join me. And please, if you got a moment, send me some comments or give me some feedback. I'd really like to hear from you. Thanks, and see you next time.